Hey, and welcome back to Inclusive Design 2024, brought to you in partnership with our Platinum supporters, Barrier Break and Intopia, and our Gold supporters, InfoAxia and Tetralogical. You can follow us on Mastodon, on LinkedIn, and on Twitter. And if you have any questions for the presenters, post them using the ID24 hashtag. That is hashtag ID24, or you can use the YouTube chat. We'll be monitoring that to gather questions for the Q&A portion at the end of our session. A reminder that ID24 is a respectful community, and you can find our code of conduct on the Inclusive Design 24 website, which is inclusivedesign24.org. And now I'm just absolutely delighted to introduce my guest host for today. Ricky, over to you.
Thank you, Eric. And I'm in turn delighted to introduce our next speaker, which is Dom Parker, talking on what should be a very interesting topic, inclusive game design, accessible mechanics, and UI. Over to you, Dom.
Thank you both for that really cool intro. So, hi everyone, and welcome to this talk on inclusive game design, accessible mechanics, and UI. ID24 is a very universal time zone event, so wherever you are in the world, I appreciate you joining in. So first thing I just wanted to do was I wanted to acknowledge the Cadical people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land that I'm presenting from today. I also recognize the traditional owners of the countries where you are all joining from today, and the First Nations people past and present here at ID24 2024. So who am I? Well, as Ricky said, my name is Dom. I use she, her pronouns. I am an audio designer that's turned into an accessibility gaming consultant, and I work at Intopia as a digital accessibility consultant. A visual description of what I look like. I am a Caucasian woman with tattoos in my late 20s. I have long brown hair and I wear yellow tinted glasses because I have very bad glare sensitivity. So today we're going to be exploring three main areas, which is the first is the importance of inclusive game design. The second is understanding how key accessible mechanics work. And third are considerations for designing for an accessible UI in video games. To kick off, let's actually ask ourselves the question of what is an accessible game? And there's no definitive answer, but I believe that there are three key aspects to consider when trying to even tackle this question. So the first one is it is a game that can be accessed, engaged, played, and completed by anyone, regardless of who you are, or if you have a disability, or whoever you are. The second is it is a game that is designed with different user groups in mind. And thirdly, this is always in debate, it's a game that does not sacrifice the difficulty or story for the accessibility. Now, what we mean by that is accessibility entails maintaining a game's core values, narrative, and challenge while ensuring the inclusivity is available for all players. There's a great quote by Mark Ballet, who's with the Able Gamers Foundation, and he talks about how gaming challenges are made for games, and that's why people enjoy video games. So we need to make sure that the challenge does not become a blocker for actually completing the game. So then we have to look at the importance of inclusive game design. So why are we going to all this effort? And again, there's three main reasons. The first one focuses on the principle. So this is usability, flexibility, and player empowerment. And what do I mean by that? So let's break it down. Usability is about ensuring games are easy to use for everyone, regardless of who they are. And this includes intuitive controls, clear instructions, and accessible interfaces. So can we actually use the game? The second is the flexibility. So providing options that allow players to customize their experience according to their needs. And again, this could fall under adjustable difficulty settings, control remapping, and visual or auditory adjustments that might be needed. And the third, which I think is most important, is player empowerment. By enabling all players to engage with and enjoy the game, we can really create a sense of accomplishment with that inclusion. The second is a bit more on the sociological and technical side. So 2.7 billion gamers will play games worldwide. And you have to recognize that that's a vast and diverse audience of people who play games. So by making our games more inclusive, that helps break down barriers and allows more people to play games, so that number grows even bigger. It's also really great for cultural and linguistic diversity. So if we can create games that can be enjoyed from people all around the world in different cultures and languages, that is another form of promoting global accessibility. The last one is more of the technical side. So this is what we mean by ever evolving. So video game development dates back to the 70s. That's almost 50 years now. So the journey of game design has been marked by significant technological advancements. And each decade of game development and the history of game development has introduced new possibilities for making games more inclusive. And this is thanks to the technological advancements. So if we leverage the latest technology, we can enhance the accessibility features, such as improved graphics with better contrast. We can have advanced audio for clearer sound cues, even down to, the hot topic of sophisticated AI, which can also personalize the gaming experience for itself. So to begin this, let's chat about the accessible mechanics. Overall, the point of an accessible mechanic is to create an enjoyable experience while maintaining a balance. Now, balance is a really key word that I'm bringing up a lot during this talk, because game design, well, as a game designer, regardless of the mathematics, logistics, and the hard coding behind the scenes, you have to create a balanced experience to not only make your game enjoyable, but accessible. So again, the key definition for what a key accessible mechanic is it's a mechanic that's designed to promote inclusivity and ensures all players have a fair and enjoyable experience. We're going to be looking at two examples today from games you may or may not have played. And we're going to be looking at how an item mechanic can work, and we're going to use Mario Kart for that example. And then we're going to look at the player mechanics, and we're going to be looking at Uncharted for that one. So let's start off with Mario Kart. So when I talk about the item mechanic, Mario Kart is a great fast-paced game that does rely heavily on items to secure your gameplay win. Mario Kart, being by Nintendo, is known for really bright colors, really cool shapes, and overall a really great design. Now, color is really important for game design because it increases your mood, it spreads your brand message, it gives off the idea of what you are, but you have to remember, not everyone can see color in the same way. So let's take a look at the shells in Mario Kart. Right, they're absolutely iconic. You know what each one of them does, but when you put it in grayscale like here, it's really hard to tell the difference between the green shell and the red shell. The blue shell, absolutely, because that thing has spikes and wings, and when you see it coming, you run for your life and just fear encapsulates you. So how can we make that a more accessible thing? So because these shells rely on their color to distinguish what they are and what they do, we need to have a secondary means to convey their function in the design. So in the case of Mario Kart, the shell's color has a corresponding audio cue, and their design of how they actually work is how we can tell them apart. So for those who don't know, the green shell in Mario Kart moves straight and it does not home on anything. So and it has a very distinct sort of wobbly sound when it goes past you. The red shell is a bit more menacing, and the red shell will home, it's a homing, what am I trying to say? It's a homing item. So it will lock onto the nearest person and it will hit you automatically unless you have something blocking it. And that has an alert sound as well. And the blue shell is the scariest one of them all. If you're coming first and a blue shell's coming at you, you fear for your life. This will always target the leading player, and it has very specific warming sounds and a really big animation when it goes off. The blue shell also hits other players along the way to its main target. So all of those items have a mechanic and a color as their secondary indicator. They have a mechanic and an audio cue to act as secondary indicators so we can tell which shell is which. Then you're probably asking, well, why do the secondary indicators matter? And It's a case of using multiple cues so that all players can get the same information and they can understand what the items do. For a game like Mario Kart, where there are so many different items, really clear shapes, bright colors, and different mechanics for each item are what players are able to quickly recognize while you're playing a really high-stake game or a fast-paced game like Mario Kart. So Nintendo's really good at having secondary cues as audio or mechanic-wise to go along with their colorful, simple designs. So that's Mario Kart done. Let's talk about something a little bit more deeper in terms of the actual player mechanic. So Mario Kart is a racing game. It's a quick, fast-paced racing game which you can play in under 10 minutes. You can play while dinner's cooking, to be honest. Quick, fast-paced, you can play with friends, pretty harmless. But let's talk about something a bit more deeper when it comes to like an action adventure game. And we're going to use the Uncharted series for that, because Uncharted, for those who don't know, was made by Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog is the company that made The Last of Us 2 and obviously The Last of Us Part 1. And they are really good at getting accessibility right. And they always have been. So Uncharted is an adventure action game, very linear, got a really great story. And it has a lot of great mechanics that cater to being accessible. So we talk about the visual design of Uncharted. It's quite neutral. All the colors are very neutral. The main character, Nathan Drake, is quite a neutral looking character in terms of his design. But the mechanics behind it are kind of what drives the inclusivity. So when you're playing Uncharted, the layout is completely consistent. There's not a lot of change going on. All the interactive elements remain consistent, and it's easier to navigate and understand what's going on. And then we look at the accessibility features provided by Naughty Dog themselves. So we've got like contextual prompts. These are on-screen prompts that can guide players through the mechanics of jumping, climbing, and puzzle solving, which is the key of what Uncharted really is. It's puzzle solving, combat, it's a whole mix of different ideas and mechanics. So by having the contextual prompts on screen, which you'll see in the next slide, it helps people who might have a cog, who might have varying cognition or even a motor impairment or limited dexterity, kind of understand where they are. You can also adjust for difficulty in Uncharted, and that can be for a variety of different reasons. You might want to play the game a bit more laid back and not have to worry too much and focus on the story. Or you might want to play the game really hard to get all the trophies for PlayStation, not achievements, because that's Xbox. So by adjusting the difficulty, we can offer great features like aim assist. For example, when we're doing the combat, we can aim assist to just lock on instantly. And that could be really helpful for someone who just wants a more laid back experience or who doesn't have the technical finesse to be able to aim perfectly. And that way, by having a adjustable difficulty, we can accommodate for different skill levels and play styles. And again, going back to the idea of a secondary indicator, Uncharted has so many of them, and that can provide both a visual indicator and a sound effect for players' actions, and that ensures that players receive feedback through multiple channels. There's an APX designer patent about it called Second Channel. And then let's talk about the user experience of actually being able to play the game. So Naughty Dog, as I said, they're fantastic with accessibility and user experience. So Uncharted has intuitive controls, and they're a simplified control scheme, and you can also remap the buttons to cater for your needs. If you might not be able to button mash very well, we can cater for that as well and reduce the repeated button presses as well, as you can see on the screen there. The other thing Uncharted does really well is having really clear objectives. So the objectives and the waypoints are very clearly marked. And overall, we've got the environmental navigation. So this game includes obvious pathways and landmarks, which make exploring the game pretty straightforward. You don't have to wander around and get lost all the time. So here's what I mean. Here we have an action mechanic from Uncharted 4. On the screen, we can see Nathan Drake there in the corner, and we're saying we have to hold with triangles. That's a visual aid and an instruction to help make this mechanic more balanced. Uncharted 4, as I said, all Uncharted series are all about jumping and climbing. So we have visual and audio cues to help time those things and identifying where we can climb as well on the game. We've got the combat mechanics, again, of aim assist, auto targeting, customizable controls, and then the puzzle solving. We have the visual aids and the hints for solving puzzles which can honestly be quite hard for certain players. But by having those hints, it makes it easier. So overall, what we're trying to do is create an experience, even though Uncharted is a heavier game and got a really more intense story, we still have to make it playable and have to be able to enjoy the story with the balanced mechanics. So the other thing we can do is, as I said, we've got multiple input options. We have different mechanics that are very clearly visible on the screen, and we can auto aim as well in combat. And that can all be done in the accessibility settings or at the start of the game when you're choosing a difficulty. So the two takeaways for mechanics I'd like you to consider are that to ensure accessibility comes through redundant design. And what we mean by that is we need to pair, or everything that has a color or is based on a color, it needs a secondary indicator to convey that as well, or a second channel, if you will. We also need to make sure that audio cues are nice and clear and consistent, especially for tricky mechanics like jumping or climbing, and the assistive features have to be there as well. And then in terms of the other takeaway, we need to design for clarity and inclusivity. And what that means is, again, we need different indicators. We need multisensory feedback, adjustable difficulty. We need consistent layouts and very clear visual cues. And this can be done through the puzzle solving, the platform challenging, and control customization. Excuse me. And the last little thing I just want to say is all these mechanics need to be tested with different players and players with disabilities to actually find the proper balance of the mechanic. Because all this work is not going to mean anything unless you actually try it and test it. So the next part of the talk is on the UI, or the user interface. So what actually is a game UI? So to put it simply, a game UI is an interface that's there to help players, and it kind of breaks the fourth wall, as it's kind of this invisible imaginary wall that separates the game from the players. And we engage with the game through the UI by using three really top main components. The first component is navigation. We need to be able to navigate through the game. The second is information. So we need to find the info that we need. And thirdly, it's the accomplishments. So accomplishing the in-game goal. A game UI isn't there to attract the player's attention. Instead, it's there to increase playability, to help and build the seamless, immersive experience that makes up the best games. It does this by creating visual cues to help the player follow the right course of action in the games. And these visual cues can be subtle or obvious. Either way, they're there to empower the players with to be decisive and confident in their journey throughout the game. So let's take a look at a really good example of quite a unique kind of by itself UI and HUD. So for those who don't know, HUD stands for Heads Up Display, and UI is obviously user interface. This game is called Another Crab's Treasure. Excuse me. It was released earlier this year. It's a lot of fun. It does a really good take on the Souls-like structure and design of the game, but we'll talk about that in another talk. So this is what a general UI will look like. We can see we've got the compass in the top corner there for navigation. In the bottom left, we have our health and mana power-up bars, which are clear for the player. And then we have our ability icons in the bottom right. So the design of this UI is quite simple. It still encapsulates us and still lets us know we're in this underwater world where this game is set, and it's still themed around, the little hermit crab there. And there's also even a little indicator to talk to the person there. So overall, this UI is nice and clean. It's simple. It does what it's designed to do. And it's got the proper contrast. It's got nice and easy symbols and shapes. And the placement is very thoughtful and very minimal. So it doesn't kind of overload our vision. It's all in our peripherals here. Now, some would argue this is too simple. And a lot of people who I talk to who are UI designers honestly go, I want really, really cool UI, but I'm worried it might not be accessible enough. And that's a totally normal thing to worry about. It's the same in web design. You might have a really cool idea for a website, but it might not be accessible. And what we're trying to say here is you don't have to sacrifice the stylishness of your UI to be accessible. And the example I have for that is, if you know me, it's coming. It's going to be Persona in a second slide, excuse me. So when it comes to the do's and don'ts of UI, it's pretty important. So all UI should contain vital information for players, such as the HUD, the waypoints, and quick access. It should all be available there. We should also include shapes, symbols, color, and shading, which can also be referred to the PAW principles if you're familiar with WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. For those who don't know, PAW stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Excuse me. And the most important tip is you should not hide your UI from players unless they want to be able to hide it themselves. Going back to that comment that I get a lot from different UI designers is they don't want to lose the cool factor and the style of their game for not being accessible. And for that, I just show them Persona 5. Excuse me. Persona 5 is a great example of how you can still have the style and pizzazz of really cool UI and HUDs available while still being accessible in your game. So Persona 5, and just for some clarity for those who might know, I'm talking about the vanilla Persona 5 here. So this is the Persona 5 that first came out in 2016, 2017, not Persona 5 Royale, which came out in 2020. So this is the very first iteration of the game. It was created by Atlas, which is a great company, and it is a Japanese role-playing game. But the visual design of Persona 5 is so snazzy, and it is so cool, and it does not sacrifice any of that coolness or snazziness for accessibility. It's still an entirely accessible layout, and it's more immersed into the game itself. Whereas with Another Crab's Tale, that can be quite simple and have the same style, it's not as immersive as Persona 5 is. Persona 5's HUD is also incredibly consistent with their layouts. The calendar is always in the top corner. You'll always have your quick access menus down below. And whenever you're in a dungeon or fighting, you will always have your health bar down below, and your map is there throughout the entire game. In terms of the accessibility features with this particular HUD, obviously the contrast is super clear. That is a clear 21:1 because all the text, the majority of the text is in black and white minus the main point, which we'll get to in the next slide. So the font is legible, it's readable, and it's nice and clear in black and white text. The size of the font is also appropriate for the video game. And there's also a lot of audio cues in Persona, which are sounds that provide feedback for menu interactions as to where you're going. In terms of the user experience, we could actually kind of clear this one, or we can pair this one with XAG, which is Xbox Accessibility Guidelines. We can pair that with 109 for object clarity. Now, I'll get into that in a second. But what we're mainly talking about here is the intuitiveness of the HUD, and it clearly displays our navigation and our accomplishments and our information, but you cannot customize this HUD in Persona 5. So that's the one downfall. We take a closer look at the general screenshot of Persona 5. Here we can very clearly see we've got the XAG 109 Xbox Accessibility Guidelines in the top corner there, 109 for object clarity information. So at the top right-hand corner, we can clearly see we have a time limit. We have 13 days to complete the objective. And underneath, we have sub-objectives, such as find the treasure and keep investigating the castle. So that's very clearly laid out for us that this is our objective and this is how long we have to finish it. For anyone who's played any Persona game, you'll know that the year and the time in Persona is very important, which is why in all Persona games, in the top corner, you'll always see the date, the day, where it is, like after school, and you'll have a weather icon as well. And that just kind of gives you an indication of where you are in the story, because Persona is known for having really heavy, like linear stories. In terms of the stylish HUD down below, we've got really vibrant, clear health bars and mana bars down below. We have our mini map as well, which shows us where we're going and navigating. Anything done in white is already explored. Anything done in red is yet to be explored. And we also have an enemy dot on the map in red. Down below, we have our quick actions. So as you can see here with the buttons as well, we can press triangle to open the menu. And Persona to me is a great example of not sacrificing your style for accessibility. This whole thing is incredibly legible to read, and it's all very clear. It might be a bit big and it's not customizable, but it's clear and the information is there for me. We also have another user action there with X decline. Excuse me. And the last example I have is a really great example of a customizable HUD and UI, and that will be done in Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, Dragon's Dogma 2 is another Japanese game. It was developed by Capcom. This game is great. If I recommend people who love Skyrim and they want something simpler or similar, grab Dragon's Dogma 2. So Dragon's Dogma is known for being entirely customizable. You can spend hours in the character creator. You can also spend hours in the interface options and turning what you want on and off, even down to the opacity. So the visual design of the customizable HUD in Dragon's Dogma 2 lets you literally tailor everything to your liking. You can have what you want displayed on the screen to what you don't want displayed on the screen. If you're not a fan of a lot of things, you can reduce the clutter to enhance your focus on the game, to kind of not necessarily break the immersion. The iconography is, again, very, very consistent. All the icons represent actions and items, and you can navigate them just like without even thinking about it. Accessibility features for Dragon's Dogma also include high contrast, and this ensures that important information stands out and it aids the players with visual elements. We've got text clarity. This uses clear, readable fonts for all in-game text, and we also have colorblind modes, and this provides multiple colorblind modes to accommodate for different types of color vision deficiencies. Excuse me. In terms of the user experience, again, the customizable HUD in Dragon's Dogma is one of my favorite things because, as I said, you can literally take out what you don't want and put in what you need. The indicators on the objectives and the quest markers in the map are incredibly clear, and they give you information that can be guided properly within the game. There is also audio feedback and secondary indicators throughout the game. And if I were to class this under another Xbox accessibility guideline header, I would probably go 112, which is UI navigation, because Dragon's Dogma 2 ensures all UI elements are easily navigable, providing multiple input methods and clear visual indicators. It also falls under XAG 113, which is HUD, because it's a customizable HUD, and it lets you prioritize the information that you want to see. And the last one I want to talk about is XAG 114, which is user-initiated events. This supports various input methods and customizable controls for critical actions, and that accommodates for different players. Now, I want to linger on that one a little bit because Dragon's Dogma 2 has a really cool feature, which we'll see in the next slide, where you can climb on top of the enemies in order to actually kill them. So you can climb up to different paths and hit weak spots. And the way that's done is through pretty clear visual cues in terms of how you want to kill them with different weapons and different attacks. So if we have a look at the next slide, this is a typical boss fight from Dragon's Dogma 2. It's a dragon. We can see the player up there stabbing. And we can also see the really cool features in this particular HUD and setting. So everything is not as very in your face as it is with Persona 5 or Another Crab's Treasure. This one is quite subtle because we can reduce the transparency and everything down below. So in the pink circle here, we can see these are all the actions you can take when you attack. And when you hit the corresponding button, the attack on the screen will light up to let you know that you've actually performed Mighty Sweep. And that's a really cool feature because you could press that button and you can't remember what it does, and it will flash up in front of you to remember that this is what the button does. And this is really great for information and accomplishment. Then we have our navigation on the side, which is a mini map. It's a very detailed mini map, very subtle, but all the icons there are quite recognizable, quite distinguishable. And it's really great when you have a huge open world game like Dragon's Dogma, but that's really important. We need things to be distinguishable enough to kind of know where we're going and remember certain areas. We have the same feature down here for the quick calls. When you press one of these, they will also light up. So if we say wait or help me or to me, when we press the corresponding buttons, they will light up. And then down here, we have the player health bar and the player stamina bar. And then on top, we have the boss bar. So this is a lot more minimal as to not to distract what's going on. Everything's a lot more transparent. But again, we can adjust this if we wanted. If we wanted the map to be bigger, we can make it bigger. If we wanted the text to be not transparent, we can just up the contrast. And this really makes for a great alternative for players who want to customize their HUDs while still keeping it relatively in theme with the game, but it's also incredibly subtle, so it's not really blocking your peripheral as much. So my takeaways for UI is to use stylish HUDs and UI elements to your advantage. Don't sacrifice the style, pizzazz, or coolness level of your designs for accessibility. Just use the proper contrast, use the, excuse me, unique legible fonts and simple shapes. We need to have that all logical enough to really kind of show how this can be done properly. You don't have to sacrifice style. You can keep it cool, just keep it accessible. And remember, simplicity is key. We can also, the second takeaway would be having a customizable HUD can do wonders for your players. By adjusting every element for player preference, you can increase the immersion or decrease the immersion and make every player happy because they can tailor things to their needs. And the last important thing I really want to talk about is, again, test with players with disabilities. You have to test these options. If it's customizable, make sure the player can actually customize it. If it's stylish, make sure the player thinks it's legible. Testing with different players with disabilities is vital to inclusive game design as a whole. So overall, accessible game design is all about making sure everyone can have fun, no matter who they are or what their abilities are. Whether it's using shapes, symbols, or sounds, thoughtful game design lets more people jump into the experience and enjoy the game fully. So those are my contacts there. If you'd like to reach out, I am always down for having a chat about accessible gaming. And thank you so much for your time.
Hey there. Wow, what a amazing talk. I
Thank you.
learned a lot, and I know we were chatting before we started, where I think like a lot of very exciting things are happening in the field of video games. I have to confess, uh, I have played this year both Another Crab's Treasure and Dragon's Dogma 2. So
Great games.
yeah, I personally have used some of the accessibility features of both, and just really appreciated them for when they were there. And to your point of the customization for Dragon's Dogma, I found it very helpful because I am no longer a teenager, so I have to play in short spurts, and with that comes trying to recall what this key press does in this moment, and like you're also literally fighting a dragon off, so it's very
Yeah.
helpful to have a discrete label.
I think it's so important, especially because, as you know, Dragon's Dogma, it's so spontaneous in terms of its combat. Like you could be walking anywhere and suddenly goblins, a harpy, and a dragon will come out at once, and you can just be so overwhelmed, but you have all the information there. It's like, oh yeah, I can attack, I can run, I can do all this. So it's just great to have it present
Yeah,
for situations like that.
yeah, and I think you touched on something very interesting there, where it's like I'm getting overwhelmed by the game as an intentional design decision. I'm not getting overwhelmed by the UI because of its lack of clarity, in a moment of like fight or flight crisis kind of thing.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think, you know, everything I feel like in game design is all about the balance and being able to balance out when your players might be feeling overloaded with, simple UI or design choices can actually help so much, especially because everything is about balance at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also I really appreciated your shout out to Persona, and over on the web design world, a thing that we run into a lot is like kind of what you were alluding to, which is accessibility can't be pretty or beautiful or like aesthetically pleasing. And then like I know a lot of people that picked up the game just based off of how striking
Yeah,
Persona's new UI is, and
yeah,
that just that made me really happy to hear.
yeah. And I think I have this discussion a lot, and as I'm sure other web designers would at the same, like I have this really cool idea and I want it to look cool, but I'm worried it won't be accessible. And you don't have to sacrifice your style for it. Like Persona is an incredibly stylish game. It's
Yeah.
still entirely legible. And a lot of people picked it up because they thought, well, that looks so cool. Like, what is this style? Like, what is this pizzazz? And it's still legible. I wish it was customizable because I sometimes it is too much for me. I wish
Mhm.
it was just a little bit withdrawn, but that's the vibe, that's the style of the Persona franchise as a
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing to think about, which is like where does the needle sit when it's part of the overall aesthetics?
100%.
Um, I have another question if you're okay with that.
Of course, ask away.
Yeah, and I think especially for video games, I'm very curious. One kind of conversation is when it comes time to navigate through these menus, to configure things to meet your needs. There's the question of like information architecture, and like where do we put accessibility settings? How do we surface this information, especially like when you factor in like internalized ableism and like people may not necessarily know that this section is actually helpful for them.
I am a really big fan of putting the alley features at the very start of the game. So, like, even before you even start playing the game, as you load up, it'll be like the most common one is select your language. Like, they should be up there with select your language and kind of show you these are different features we have. You can tailor it to what you want. As as controversial as it is, the game Hogwarts Legacy did that really, really well, where everything was straight up in your face saying, these are the features we have, pick and choose what you like. As controversial as that game is, they did accessibility very, very well. So having it at the very start to let players know, okay, I can customize this. Hiding accessibility features will get nowhere. You don't want to have to go digging for them. So having them at the start of the game is my favorite.
Yeah. Wasn't it one of those games? I know there's a few that actually has an arachnophobia toggle.
Yeah, Hogwarts Legacy has that as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of games now will have the arachnophobia, fear of spiders toggle on there. There's also the reduction of blood and guts and gore. You can also
Mhm.
turn off blood as well. Um, so a lot of people have those options now too, which can really help people who just are squeamish or who just don't want to see it as well. So those features coming up are really quite helpful. And again, they should be at the front of the game to kind of give you a heads up of, hey, this game has a lot of killing and blood and guts. If you don't want to see it, you can turn it off.
Yeah.
So
Somebody in YouTube chat, Linda, just said spiders into cats! Exclamation point.
wouldn't be
Um,
mad.
yeah, yeah. I have one more question, but before I do that, I wanted to turn it over to Ricky.
I did have a couple of questions for you, Dom.
Yeah,
One
sure.
relates to the quote you said at the beginning from Mark Barley about challenge not becoming a blocker. And a lot of game developers will say, well, there is an inherent challenge in this that is just going to make it impossible for people with disabilities to play.
Mhm.
What are your views on that? Is it possible to get past that?
I believe it is. I believe it absolutely is possible to get past those challenges which could become blockers. And the easiest way to do that, honestly, is with a difficulty setting. Just if you
Right.
don't want as many monsters to come at you at once, you can turn the difficulty down. So instead of 10 monsters, it could be 5 or 2. Having the option to scale back the difficulty will allow for less blockers, and you can still have the challenge. What we're trying to do as designers is to not have the challenge become a blocker, because then the fun gets lost and then you rage quit and throw the game away and you've lost a player. Essentially, we're trying to make the game inclusive for everyone by having these options to make it tailored essentially to their needs with different difficulty settings, different power-ups, different items and such. So I think it's definitely doable.
Right, right. The other question I had was, and I think I probably know the answer to this, but you mentioned about testing with people who have disabilities. There is probably in game development more use of emulators than there is in websites emulation. What are your views on using emulators to test for accessibility?
I mean, if that's all you have at your disposal, then I personally don't see the harm. If that's all you have, then
Hmm.
that's okay. But it also does not hurt to reach out or go on Discord and say, hey, I'm doing a game and I would love someone to test it, because I guarantee you, who doesn't want to go and test a game? Who doesn't want to get to play a game before it comes out and get to experience that and give their feedback? So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
And that's a
it's
good point that there are people on forums who will do that,
yeah,
who will participate in that. Yeah, good point.
100%. Like there's great forums out there for players with disabilities. There's blind gamers, there's able gamers, there's so many
Yeah.
different Discord servers, forums, chats, like Facebook groups, like Twitter groups or X or whatever it is now. So it's just about finding the people who will 100% willingly test the game. Like that seems like fun. And the fact that you're asking for their
Yeah,
input
yeah.
is even better. So I think if that's all you have at your disposal, sure, but don't be afraid to reach out to different communities or Discord servers or even just like game jam servers too. Um, to be like, hi, I'm building a game. I just want to test this part to see if it works or not. Like everyone's happy to help in the community.
Yeah, yeah, good stuff. Back to you, Eric.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I actually, and to your, kind of one of the earliest things you said about the global population that the games industry serves, I learned that Hearthstone basically has an entirely fan-run mod for blind players, and they were basically like, "Yeah, let's play Hearthstone." So you know what? We're gonna patch it, and some of that was actually upstreamed into the actual app, which I think is like really great. Where it's like it's one of those things where everybody's kind of coming together to make it better for everyone. The question I had is a little open-ended, but like, what are you most excited for the future of gaming accessibility?
I'm excited for there to be more people with disabilities actually building the games themselves. Um, a lot of the time, a lot of people will say that, yeah, I want to build a game, but the screen reader won't even work with the Unity. The technology won't even work with Unreal Engine. So hoping that the developers can make the actual gaming engines accessible for people with disabilities to be able to use, so then that they can actually go and make games. That's what I'm really excited for in the future. And I would love to see more representation in video games as well about different people. As much as, we love The Last of Us, we love Uncharted, it's very hard to tell Nathan Drake and Joel apart. There needs to be more diversity. There needs to
Yeah,
be more inclusivity. And games are doing that now. I really wish this was more prominent, back when I was growing up as well. So I'm excited for the engines to become more accessible. I'm excited to see where VR goes and how VR can become more accessible as well. I think that's a really cool concept, which I'd love to dive into more, especially as an audio nerd who loves binaural and spatial audio.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm excited for more diverse narratives and diverse characters in video games as a whole.
Yeah, 1,000%. I love that answer. Thank you for sharing that with me.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Um, I think let's end this on a high note. Dom, you've covered just a lot of just incredible material, and you've given us a really good lay of the land for, like, it's not even an emerging technology. It's more just like a whole area of digital entertainment that is honestly good and just getting better every day. And like, thanks for providing that map for us to all follow.
My absolute pleasure. I am always down to talk about this. So whenever, just hit me up. I won't shut up about it. So it's
Okay.
like whenever you want to talk about it.
I might just take you up on that.
Yeah.
All right. So, I think for all of y'all who are watching this, either live or recorded, don't forget to hit that YouTube like and subscribe buttons. And that will keep you in the loop for not only upcoming talks for the rest of ID 2024, but also for future editions. And to that point, ID24 exists because it is brought to you with thanks from our sponsors, including Barrier Break, Intopia, Infoaxia, Tetralogical, Intuit, Adrian Roselli LLC, Assistive Labs, the Law Office of Laney Feingold, Skyscanner, and Vispero. And we will be back at the top of the hour with our next session. So see y'all then.
Thank you, Dom.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.